we can take it in a what does it mean doctrinally? What is this theological idea? What is this theological concept? But as we walk through with idolatry, there are very practical realities of how this was in day-to-day life. We've even got, she's not here, she's gone with our deacon, we've even got the practical example of a young lady that is teaching about something called the Constitution. And she's having to do that for a reason, because there's a generation today that doesn't know what it is, that doesn't know the details of it anywhere beyond my rights as an American. That's pretty much all they have, the right to this and the right to that, but they don't know what it says. I want to use that as a practical example of having grown up in something, not just grown up in something, but having experienced the entire framework that is provided by something, and to still not know anything about it. Right? That you can live off the benefits of it and appreciate it, and because you don't even know the details of it, you don't even know when you're twisting and abusing the very thing that's supporting your freedom to do what it is that you're doing. That's this description of what's going on. We've had this description of 3 generations that we just described. We just described Joshua, all the elderly ones that were with Joshua that had seen everything the Lord had done. And then we have this 3rd generation rising up, who, I don't know if you know much about biology, but generations tend to overlap. The generation doesn't die and then magically poof, another generation happens. There's this thing where the next generation is sort of raised by the previous ones. So we've got this situation where we've got the kingdom of Israel, and they haven't taken the land yet. They've not gotten the temple. We're not anywhere close to the time of David and to the time of Solomon. And so we've got the tabernacle, and we've got the presence of God in the tabernacle, and how he's taught all of the feasts, everything we've talked about through the feasts, all of his protection, his promise, and his provision. That's the daily framework in how they've lived, in his protection, his promise, and his provision year in and year out. It's been established that the reason why they can even be God's people is, 1, because he's chosen them and set them apart, and 2, because he's established the atonement so that all of the sin that practically separates them from their God, he's taken care of, so that they are now a people that are God's because God chose them, and God has allowed them to come as close as they can get because God's taken care of their sin. And year in, year out, we have the cycles of promise, provision, protection, promise and provision, year in and year out. And we've got not only that, but we're in this wonderfully unique time where the promise they're talking about is right in front of them. If you can't associate with any of this, let me know, because this should be very relevant to the church today. If there's the promise that was in front of them was literally right in front of them. The inheritance that they were supposed to claim was literally right a couple of miles away that they were supposed to go in and take. And so the dynamic we want to be looking at today is a people without a king. But they were without a king because they left the king. Right? We've got this whole problem with doing the right thing. We've got this whole problem of legalism and the idea of trying to get things right and our own sense of morality and things like that. That's not even in the picture in this. All right? We are in this description of a people who have been called and set apart and provided by God, and He's their king, and He's provided for them an inheritance. And throughout this entire book, we have a people who have been called by a king, who have no king. Just let that sink in. A set-apart people, called by a king, given an inheritance, who somehow have no king and have no inheritance. That juxtaposition should just terrify us. So they have this, they've been called, they've been set apart, they've been protected, they've been provided, they've been promised, all by their God. And they come to this section where we've got an entire generation that has seen Joshua lead them into taking part of their inheritance. And this is a process that God was given that was going to take more than one generation to do. And it comes time for the third generation, to come in and go in and continue the process and take the inheritance that they have been given by God. And that is the first chapter of Judges that we're doing this flashback right before that. This is the problem with Judges 1, which I'm going to let you all read Judges on your own. I would end up reading this entire book up here today, so we're not going to do that. I'm going to let you all read it, but basically this is what happened. Joshua died. All the people that fought alongside Joshua died. And a people rose up that knew not God. They don't remember, they didn't see everything Joshua went through. And they don't know of the promises of God. And I got to harp on that because we've preached all this before. You got to remember they were taken out of Egypt. And they were led to Sinai. They got the Ten Commandments. Then they were led to the Promised Land. They didn't have faith, so they went back into the wilderness for 40 years. And then they came back, and when they finally came back, Joshua led them over the Jordan into the Promised Land. When they went in over the Jordan into the Promised Land, they set up these big 12 stones. Do you remember what it was for? It's for every child to go, Dad, what's that for? Yeah. This is when He led us over the Jordan. There's no reason why verse 10 should exist in Scripture. And also, all that generation that were gathered unto their fathers, there arose another generation after them which knew not the Lord. There should have been no reason. Because it's not that they did not know the structure of the Lord. They grew up going to Tabernacle every year. They grew up having the atonement sacrifice. They grew up having this feast and that feast. They grew up in the framework of all of the Levitical laws. They grew up in the framework of being Israel. And yet they knew not the Lord. Nor yet the works which He had done for Israel. Which meant one of two things. Either the previous generation refused to teach it, or that generation refused to learn it. Knowing our fallen nature, it's probably somewhere in the middle. But that's the only two ways that it's possible for somebody to grow up in the church and not know God, is for the church to not be functioning as the church. We've talked about idolatry. I want this to be very practical. That I want you to get this idea of a people that grew up day to day, going to church Sunday morning, Sunday evening, going through the rest of the week, doing their work and trying to raise as much money as necessary, coming back on Wednesday, going back in the world, the rest, then coming back on Sunday, and repeat over and over again. And so they hear 200 messages, 200 some odd messages a year, and have 200 some odd worship services a year, and not including whatever special services that may go on. And yet they knew not God. So because they were a people that had no king, because they were a people that knew not God, this generation rose up and sort of took the the kind, they took the form, and they did the outward thing that they remembered having heard that Joshua did. And so they said, God, what should we do? How should we go take the land? And God says, do A. And so they go and do B. And amazingly, from the mercy of God, in doing B, they got half the land. So they still got to live there. They just didn't get to own it. They were now had roommates. They were living with their enemy, the Canaanites and the Hittites and all of the other ites that were stayed in the land that they were supposed to get out of the land were now their bedfellows. They were the ones that they did trade with and intermarried with, and everything that they were not supposed to do. They halfway inherited the land and whole way forgot their God. And so we've got this description of each tribe going in and getting so much of a percent of the inheritance that they were supposed to receive the whole thing for. And then we've got this cycle. The entire book of Judges is this lesson in what the life of somebody who has no king looks like. And it looks like this. They are in sin. They get the consequences of sin. The consequences of sin goes on long enough so they get tired and frustrated and overwhelmed with the consequences of sin. So they cry out to God, oh God, get me out of these consequences. And God's good enough. And he came in and he would raise up a judge and deal with it and set them back right. For them to forget God, go back into their sin, then get all the consequences, finally get tired of the consequences, call, oh God, save us, and he brings you back. This is a people without a king. This is a people who claim to be the people of God, but do not have him as their king. Over and over. So we've got this description in Judges from Judges 3 all the way up to Judges 16, starting with raising up of Othniel, however we pronounce that name. He happened to be the nephew of Caleb, so he's the closest thing they had to remembering the works that God did. And they had only had to be in bondage for 8 years for an Othniel to rise up. And then we get all the way up. We've got this cycle that happens over and over again. And we have Othniel, we remember Deborah, and then we remember, I'm going to get that order wrong, but we have Gideon, and we go through and we get all the way up to Samson. And we start out with captivity for 8 years. And then we have the full captivity of the Philistines, where it took Samson to be in the stadium and pull them all down, and the final victory just being the destruction of everybody. Do we see how this builds? The life of a people without a king starts in small consequence and always ends in complete consequence and destruction. But we don't really notice that upward trajectory of consequence because we think that because he constantly rescues us from our consequence, then that means we have a king. All that means is he's faithful to his word to make us his people. That doesn't mean from our perspective we are his people. We miss those things. We misrepresent his faithfulness for ours. So we've got this description all the way up to Samson. And I'm going to skip from Samson to chapter 17 in Judges, just because I'm going to do this through the flashbacks. So the entire history of the Judges has happened. We've gone from Othniel, we've gone all the way up to Samson. And then the rest of the book, starting at chapter 17, is the flashback to say, how in the world did this all start? How in the world did we go from a people, from Joshua to the generation that were raised up with Joshua and saw the works of the Lord, to this next generation that hadn't seen the works of the Lord, but should have known him because of the generation that had. So we've gone all the way through all the judges. Samson's pulled down the Colosseum, and we get through all the history, and then God, just like that movie, he says, and how did we get here? We flash back all the way back to the beginning. This is either right before or right after the time of Othniel historically. So we're at the very beginning with the description of how a generation of God can raise up not knowing God. And you want to know the description that we get is not a high theological description of all of the great sin that was going on. We get this intimate little portrait of the family life. Well, let's start reading. Chapter 17, verse 1. And there was a man of Mount Ephraim whose name was Micah. And verse 2 is huge, so we'll get through this. And he said unto his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from thee, about which thou cursest and spakest of also in mine ears, behold, the silver is with me, I took it. And his mother said, blessed be thou of the Lord, my son. Yes. There's a lot in that verse. But I want you to look at this just day-to-day life. We've got multi-generations living in the same house, which is the way it was back then. We've got Micah, who's an adult man who's old enough to have adult sons living with his elderly mother. The mother has obviously gotten enough life savings of being somewhere around 1,100 shekels of silver, and she kept it wherever she kept it. And all of a sudden, one day, it was stolen. And so what does she do? Does she go to her son and say, son, my 1,100 shekels of silver are gone. Let's go to the magistrate and try to get this horrible crime that has been done. We need some justice here. We need to find what happened to my life savings. Can we make this right? No, that's not what happened. No, she complained and cursed and moaned. See, I don't have any idea how long there is between when Micah stole the money and when verse 2 happens. I'm guessing it was quite a few months, if not years, of him just listening to his mother complain and curse the person that stole her money. All right? But that's the household dynamics. At this point, we have let's go back to that time going around Jericho. All right, there, God said, "March silently around," and then at the end of everything, scream. He tore the walls down, and then destroy everything, take nothing. Everything, all the goes belong to the church. First fruits go to the church. And so they did. They obeyed. Go around Jericho once a day, then 7 times the seventh day. Shout, walls come down. Achan steals something for himself. Righteous, the presence of a holy God demands justice. And immediately there was a problem. Immediately of the theft, immediately of the disobedience, there was the Old Testament outward version of conviction. God backed up and they lost the next battle. All right? But immediately, sin in the camp, presence of God judges it. Here we have daily life. Theft has taken place. No need for immediate justice. No conviction, no presence of the Lord. There's no problem here. In fact, the only problem going on here is the fact that the mom was complaining and cursing the whole time, and Micah finally just couldn't take any more of it. All right, we just think about home life. Don't act like this is just some high holy thing. Think of the way your household works. How long can something go before you need it dealt with? How long can sin in your own life go before you have to deal with God because God's not letting you go on the subject? How long can we come in through church and we'll hear a word, we'll hear singing, the person next to me singing, we've got the word going on, and we stand there and everybody else is going on, but I'm just here doing that because there's somehow nothing going on here other than what is the next external thing that I'm required to do. That if the next thing that I'm required to do is the thing that's going on in me, I guess I don't have anything and I just got to sort of stand here. Get this picture that how long can sin go on in a household before it's even acknowledged? Did you notice in this entire verse sin was never acknowledged? Oh, he admitted to stealing, but sin was never acknowledged. There was an interpersonal problem between father and son. There was no issue between people and God. There was no need for justice. They're year in, year out, needing the atoning sacrifice for their sin had no effect on his relationship with his mother whatsoever. That he saw the $1,100 and he was going to take it. So he did. And finally, she cursed one too many times and he couldn't take it. So he says, "Woman, that money that you've been complaining to me about for all this time, fine, I took it. Here it is." And so the mother bewails, "Oh, the sin that has been in our house. Not only has there been theft, but it has been my own son that has brought this sin before God in our house, and God restore us." We've got a Psalm 51 experience from the mother and the son? No. Because that was never the issue. It was the practical action of the day is, I took what I want, got to deal with the interpersonal dynamics, but beyond the interpersonal dynamics of what's expected of me and what I'm supposed to do and what I want and how do I get away with it and all of these things, it never gets above that. Day to day, for each person, for the mother, for the son, for Micah's son that we'll get to in a bit, there is never any concern that there was sin in the house. Which means that we know that there was no righteousness, because righteousness is that demand for holy justice. It says that the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from thee, about which thou cursest and spakest also in my ears. You haven't let this one go. I guess I'll give it back to you. I took it. And so, what does she do? She blesses Micah. "Oh, thank you for finally giving it back to me. We've had this problem. We've had this conflict. And now we've done what's necessary to put this conflict behind us, and now we can just move on. So we're going to move on to what I originally saved the money for in the first place." So we get to verse 3 to find out what we were going to use the money for in the first place. "And when he had restored the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver unto the Lord from my hand for my son." Pretty good so far. "To make a graven image and a molten image." Now get this. This is not the children of Israel going and serving Balaam and Ashtaroth. We talked about that before, right? With the basic form of idolatry being trading in a system of atonement for a system of appeasement, and a system of gifts from the Lord to a system of lust satisfaction. We've talked about that before a couple weeks ago. We haven't gotten to Balaam yet. We will get to Balaam. Probably not in this message, but no, historically, they will get to Balaam. right now, they've just decided they're going to worship God their way. They've just decided that the entire framework of how God came to them and provided an atonement so that they could come to God was not necessary. They've just decided that the tabernacle is over there. The tabernacle is a place we go and we make the atoning sacrifice. The presence of God is there, and we go several times a year. We've got all the Sabbaths, and we deal with God. He's told us how we can come to Him. But I don't really need Him. I just need a couple of images of Him. The first, clue that should go off would be the first 2 of the 10 Commandments. That should be a slight hint to them that this was somewhat problematic, if I could understate it that way, of being somewhat problematic. And yet, with a straight face, they says, I've dedicated this money to the Lord so that I can make an idol of Him. We'll pause there for a second, and we'll get to this in a minute, but we got to realize that there were 3 devilish doctrines in the Old Testament that the New Testament describes them out of chronological order, but describes the demonic doctrines throughout the Old Testament. And the first one is that of Cain. The idea that God should accept whatever it is that I would give Him. That what I can offer good, and He should have to acknowledge what it is that comes to me and accept anything that I would give Him. And we've got the doctrine of Balaam, which is the doctrine of, okay, I acknowledge God is God. He's more powerful than me, and His ways are higher than my ways, and I can't go against Him, but yet I will not go with Him. And so the way I balance, I will not go with Him, but I cannot go against Him, is I will just slowly subvert. I will just slowly, you remember the story of Balaam? We've got the story where that he was paid to prophesy against Israel. And he keeps going up, and he prophesies 3 times for Israel, because he keeps going, I can't tell you something that God hasn't told me to tell you, and He's not going against Israel, so I can only prophesy what God has told me to say. But if you really want to take them down, all you got to do is go live next door to them and have your daughters marry them. And within a generation, you won't have to worry about their God. And so that was the doctrine of Balaam that was fully embraced by Israel. And then the third devilish doctrine in the Old Testament is the one we went over a couple of weeks ago, of that of Korah. And the ones that says that I deserve to have the highest position underneath God. You get this theme that's going on, that God is not the all-powerful God that I am worshiping, that I love, because He chose me. He came to me so that I can come to Him, and He's made the way so that I can go to Him. And everything in my life is framed off the fact that He said I can come to Him. He's made the way for me to come to Him. So I'm mature in all the ways of coming to Him. I don't have to learn how to do it. I've been made to be His. I can grow in it and I can get more mature in it, but I'm not having to earn it or learn it in a way that it's like learning a magical ritual. If I can just learn the right things to say, then God will acknowledge me better. No, it's learning in that sense of dating and being engaged, where you learn about the other person, you get closer, and your relationship matures as you're going through. So we've got these 3 different ways that the dynamic of our life being based off of coming to Him through the atonement that He's made. We base the function of our life on something other than that. We acknowledge it, we appreciate it, we know He's God, but then we live our life. And while we pay somewhat homage to that, knowing that He's God over there, this is how I'm going to live my life over here. And he's going to have to acknowledge everything that I do. If he wants a relationship with me, he's going to have to acknowledge what comes out of my mouth. He's going to have to say, no, well done. If he wants a well done, my good and faithful servant, if he wants to be able to say that so bad, he's just going to have to say that to whatever it is that I do. Because this is what family life was like, to create the generation that knew not God. Because they didn't have to change to know God. God had to change to know them. So when he restored the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver unto the Lord from my hand for my son, to make a graven image and a molten image. Now therefore I will restore it unto thee. And he restored the money unto his mother, and his mother took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to the founder, who made thereof a graven image and a molten image, and they were in the house of Micah. So they followed through. Of course, they didn't use the whole 1,100 shekels, but they still followed through. And the man Micah had a house of gods, and made an ephod and a teraphim, and consecrated one of his sons, who became his priest. This whole system with the atonement and the priest and the Levites and all of that, we don't need that. We can have our own little version over here. And so, we can't leave out the priests and the Levites, because we'll be getting to them in a second. But we've got this entire system of a people who should have a king, and because they should have a king, they should have an inheritance. We haven't gotten past king and inheritance. That's the theme throughout the whole thing. They should have a king and an inheritance. And so we've got the 12 tribes. 11 tribes had an inheritance. One tribe didn't, at least not an inheritance of land. One tribe had God as their inheritance. Remember? Those are the Levites. Those were the ones who worked in the tabernacle, did all the functional work in the tabernacle. They didn't have any land to themselves, but they went in and they were provided for by the church to do the work of the church, so that all of the framework, what we're talking about of the atonement, of the protection, the promise, and the provision of God could practically, functionally happen. That was who they were called to be. That was their entire inheritance before God, was that role. Instead of it was land, it was the house of God. And so we don't need any of those. I'll just consecrate my son, and my son is going to be the priest for my graven images. We don't need the priest for the real atonement. We just need a priest to cover and minister about the way that I want to worship God. The amount that I want to offer myself, the way that I want to offer it, what it is that I have to offer God is towards these molten idols, these graven images. So I'm going to consecrate my son. I'm going to teach him how to do all of the worship in-house, as opposed to teaching him about all the great works of my God. We're going to learn how to have everything that led up to verse 2. All those family dynamics, I'm sure you can imagine those very well. The mother and the father bickering and having to come to some sort of agreement. The whatever discipline does or does not happen with the children. No, they go in and they learn what good and bad and right and wrong and what's expected of them at home. But then they come to church and they have to act right, and they have to pay attention, and they have to be good little girls and boys while they're at home and get all the answers right in children's church. And then go back home and where there's lying, backbiting, stealing, all these things, and there's no need to have godly order and structure at home. We can just sort of appreciate the temples over there. And then it goes even further from that, where we can just have our own good version of Christianity in our house. And we don't even need to learn about what God's done through Joshua. That was several generations ago. Do you really expect God to speak through you? This is a generation that didn't even know how he used Moses, how he used Joshua, didn't know the details and the reality of God going out and conquering armies so that we can then go out there and finish the job. How many people here have ever seen a war happen and God thunder from the heavens and the entire enemy just be routed in front of you without any fighting from this enemy or from this army? In the human, we've not seen that. But they had. They had seen. That was daily life. That was the method by which they were supposed to go in and get the inheritance that was being given to them, because it wasn't just go out and do it all right. It says, show up and I'm giving it to you. And they stopped showing up. And they taught their kids to not show up. In verse 6, we get the theme. But in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. And then we've got what the devil does for everybody in this position. You might ask what that is. Let's keep reading. There was a young man out of Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. All right, so Levite, we know his inheritance was the temple, the tabernacle. His inheritance was God. His entire life was built around being part of that mediator between God and man. He wasn't the high priest or the priest that would actually do the sacrifice. They were the ones that would work in the temple and or at this time the tabernacle, and they did all the labor that was necessary for the people to be able to come to God. And so this was their gift, this was their inheritance, this was their place, this was their meaning. And we find a Levite who's not there. So imagine we've got an entire nation of Micah households in one way, shape, or form. I'm not saying that every household the son stole 1,100 shekels from their mother, but whatever sin dynamics were in each household where they had no conviction before God, where the fact that it was sin before God was never the problem. The fact that there was interpersonal conflict that needed to be dealt with humanly was the most of a problem there was, but the fact that there was sin in the house before God was never the problem, because the atonement was not important. And so the tabernacle is not as wealthy as it should be. And so the Levites don't have as much food as they should have. And so the Levites who are getting starved out of their inheritance have a choice. They can either, in faith, continue to work the tabernacle with less food, or they can go out and start looking for it on their own. So here we have a Levite who chose the latter. He went out and he started looking for his own provision because he's already decided that God's not going to provide for him. He's already decided that the inheritance God gave him was a con, and he was never going to be given what he needed through God, who was promised to supply all of his needs, and in fact was the provision that he needed. And so he's left and he's going to go and he's going to take care of himself, but he's still a Levite, so he still has the reputation of being a man of God. So he's out. He's a young man out of Bethlehem, Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite. He sojourned there, and the man departed out of the city from Bethlehem, Judah, to sojourn where he could find a place, as if he hadn't already been given a place, so that he could find a place. And he came to Mount Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he sojourned. And Micah said unto him, Micah said in his heart, God has acknowledge the fact that I went through so much trouble to make these graven images. God has seen my Cain sacrifice and has had a change of heart and is now blessing me and says that, well done, Cain, my good and faithful servant, and is now giving me everything I need. He is bringing me, I consecrated my son, but now he's brought me a real priest. And he doubles down on it all. And we've got this situation where somebody whose entire daily life is built around selfish sin, whose entire worship is built upon demanding God to honor him, whose very function in the family is about teaching a rejection of the presence of God. All the practical ways that has happened, fortune shined on him, and something good has happened, so he automatically interprets something that is in line with what he wants as being acknowledgement from God. I want this thing, I have gotten this thing, therefore God must be pleased with me. How often do we get into that? See, God is, his presence is good. We know his presence. He speaks, he convicts, he teaches, he speaks through, and he changes lives. But we would rather interpret his presence by us getting something that seems to validate ourselves, as opposed to this presence which primarily comes in the form of judgment. Because this shouldn't surprise anybody, this is not a holy form. He is a holy God. So when we are in his presence, judgment happens with me first and with you, because it should be happening with each and every one of it. Righteousness comes through judgment always. It starts there and it matures and grows through teaching and prophecy and all of the works of the Lord, all of the healing and all the works of the Lord begin through personal judgment. And so we don't tend to like judgment. We don't like conviction. We don't like dealing with the presence of a holy God. So we appreciate the things that seem to validate my own personal religion. And so that's what's going on here. A Levite who was in sin, so to speak, comes across a family who was in sin, looking for their own version of God. We've got a win-win. We've got somebody looking for provision, finding somebody who's willing to provide. And we've got somebody who's looking for the covering of God without God, finding a priest who's willing to offer it. We've got a match made in heaven, and now we've got the blind leading the blind right into a ditch. Verse 9, and Micah said unto him, Whence comest thou? And he said unto him, I am a Levite of Bethlehem, Judah, and I go to sojourn where I may find a place. And Micah said unto him, Dwell with me, and be unto me a father and a priest, and I will give thee 10 shekels of silver by the year, and a suit of apparel, and thy victuals. He didn't ask for much. He wanted some clothes, some food, a little bit of spending money, and he was good. Maybe enough to spend on Netflix, just enough to get by. He can have a comfortable life, and he doesn't have to worry about where his provisions coming. He doesn't have to worry about his next meal. He can just go on and bless the household and teach a little bit and somehow teach the scriptures devoid of the God who gave the scripture, and keep going. We don't know what happened to the son. The son was the priest, and now he gets sort of dethroned and the next priest comes through. But we see this dynamic of the household learning how to worship God without God. And you wonder how that slid into the worship of Baal and worshiping of all of the world's gods. And verse 11, and the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man was unto him as one of his sons. And Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man, Micah consecrated the Levite. The one who was consecrated by God, given God as an inheritance to run the temple of God, was consecrated by a man who was running his household through sin. I want you to get it. There should be a massive amount of theological irony in this entire chapter, juxtapositions that should not exist, yet somehow do. And Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and was in the house of Micah. Then said Micah, now know I, the Lord, then said Micah, now know I that the Lord will do me good, seeing I have a Levite to my priest. Seeing that I am now spiritually covered by spiritual rebellion, the Lord has blessed me. And so history continues, and you say, how is this the flashback? How has everything begun here? Well, I won't read it. Y'all can read the next couple of chapters. But the gods that Micah developed, that were ruled over, that were ministered over by this Levite, are the ones that were stolen by the tribes of Dan to be the official gods of the tribes so that they could worship these gods underneath this Levite, then to go and get the inheritance they were supposed to get through God. These gods were the motivation and the totems, if you will, of the way the people went to get their inheritance. This was the spiritual backing that the tribe of Dan had in going to get their inheritance. That's chapter 18. We won't go in and read that, but this was the birth of it, that a household in sin that refused to deal with God, but wanted to have their own righteousness, took a form for themselves, and then had that form stolen as if it was God. Can you imagine these gods having been stolen in the same method that the Ark of the Covenant had been stolen? No, with how we studied a couple weeks ago, when the priests had taken the Ark of the Covenant out as if it was a totem, as if that was going to win the battle, and then it got stolen by the Philistines, and they gave it back, and all of that. This is how venerated these idols were to the people, simply because they had no interest in righteousness. They had no interest in the real presence of God. They just wanted the form. So let's go to Jude. The book warning about false teaching, false teachers. We'll start in the middle. Let's see. Verse 11. Woe to them, for they have gone after the way of Cain, ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Korah. We've read through a human daily life description of this verse. We just read through a description of people who demanded what they bring be honored, who go after the things of God for price with it being corrupted, so that they don't actually have to stand before the presence of God. And those people who demand, just like that Levite did, he left where he would have been a servant to a place where he was going to be the head guy. Right? We've gone through this human description of verse 11. These are spots, church. These are spots in your feasts of charity. This is Old Testament. This is several hundred years old language. We don't really use spots this way anymore. Let's use a good illustration to describe what the spots in the Feast of Charity are. You could literally interpret this verse, these are the rocks in your food. You cook the soup, you start eating, and then you chomp. Tooth gets cracked because you just chomped into a big old rock. That's what this is. This is the iceberg to the Titanic. This is the thing that you think everything's going well, and then you bite into it, and corruption, death. So these are the spots in your feasts of charity. This is the spot in the function of the church. We got the feast in the Old Testament. Well, feast is the same thing in the New Testament. They had love feasts, what we would call potlucks. The people getting together and meeting and worshiping God and breaking open the Word in the house, in what we would call house church, because they didn't have temple. But wherever the people would gather to worship God and hear the Word preached and eat food and fellowship, and it was sort of all together. Your feasts of charity and the functioning of the church and the unity of the body, this is the rocks in the soup of the way the body comes together and works. This is the corruption that takes what should be good food and makes it destructive. This is what takes the soup that should be nourishing to your body and to your soul and makes it destructive to you. These are the spots in your feasts of charity. This is the reason why churches die. These are the spots in your feasts of charity. When they feast with you, they can do it without fear. When Micah can come and sit in the midst, and there is so little active righteousness, not only in your daily life, but in your worship. There is no need for the presence of God in daily life, so there's even less need for the presence of God in collective unity, worship of the body. That somebody can not know the Lord, they can come in and they can sit down and they can, to whatever degree, appreciate the music. They can get some good theological understanding, some good teaching. They can follow the 3 points in a poem. They can do all of those things, but they will not experience the fear of God in your midst. This is the spot in your feast of charity that you have lost the power of God. Feeding themselves without fear. Clouds they are without water, carried about with winds. Trees whose fruit withereth, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots. Well, there's a lot there. That somebody can come in, be lost, sit down in the midst, not be affected by the presence of God. Dead men walking, but then experiencing only dead men when there should be live men bringing him to the foot of the cross. Of course, clouds without water, but they show how little water is in your clouds. Trees whose fruit withereth, without fruit, twice dead, plucked up by the roots. Raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame, wandering stars to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. Shouldn't that just bring up the fear of God in somebody? If that was the description of you today, that you are raging like the waves of the sea, just foaming out your own shame, that everything that comes out of you is just the frothing that has no substance and is just good to serve as what's that old example? Our last generation pastor would give, you always go in and test the fruit like squeezing the tomato, and if it's good, the juice pops out. This is the bad fruit. You squeeze it and the rotten tomato comes out, just enough to go, you stop squeezing, and so it stops squirting out the bad fruit. And just enough so that the next time there's just a little bit of pressure, more bad stuff, it froths over and then backs away when the pressure's off, and then froths over again when the pressure's on, and then goes away. And you get this image of rejection and consequence and death and crying out, "Oh God, help me," and he does, and then rejection and consequence. And we've got this cycle over and over in our daily lives where the only thing that we grow in maturity in is the level of our sin and the amount of the rescue we need, instead of it being the other way around, where we grow in maturity in knowing him more and getting sweeter, and it taking fewer and fewer songs of the bottom end of the triangle to get you to the next one. You can go in and you can sing one line of one hymn, and then all of a sudden you're right there before his throne. Or do you need 15 songs and the next person next to you to start praying before you realize, oh yes, I'm supposed to be talking to somebody? Raging waves of the sea. If you were to go back and look at your last day, your last week, the last cycle, what is grown in more maturity? The level of sin that you've had to deal with, the level of the consequence that you've had to deal with, the level of, put this in human emotional terms, because that's where a lot of consequences seem to come out, of the loneliness, of the depression, of the anxiety, of the psychosomatic physical problems, all of those issues that come up that should be a big red light of human practical versions of experience of sin consequence. What's matured in your life? Are you closer to the Lord, or do you have to cry out to the Lord more because you just have more death and you don't need him, you just need the death taken away? But somehow this week was worse than last week, which was worse than the week before it, instead of the other way around. Raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame, wandering stars to whom is reserved blackness of darkness forever. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying. All right, so we know who Enoch was. He walked with the Lord and was translated because he got too close to God and God just had to take him. There was a book of all of his stuff. It's apocryphal. The point of this verse is not to bring in the Apocrypha, but the point of this verse is the fact that what was told to the man who walked with God is the same thing that was told to the meekest man on earth, which is the same thing that was told to the man who laid his head on Jesus' bosom, because both Moses preached this and both John preached this, just as Enoch preached them generations and way before, that God was going to come in and wage war with 10,000 of his saints. Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints. So what describes you? What describes how you come to him? Is it this description of a man without a king, a man without an inheritance who just needs to cry out to God for rescue over and over again? You have to cry out for the I'm sorry version of repentance over and over again, the promise of personal reformation over and over again, because this consequence just keeps growing and this consequence just keeps growing, and it's gotten to the place where if God doesn't do something, then I'm just gone. And so we mistake that goodness of God for holiness on my part. Are you as those who walk with God, talk with God, and that maturity of the relationship with God just grows, and you're either one of the people that the laws can come and sit next to you with no fear of God, not because they fear you, but because the Lord is with you and you worship him, and he is righteous. He is, remember the definition of righteous is holy justice. That his holy justice is made manifest in your life, so that the person who's on the wrong side of justice has to fear it. So they might be driven to the cross, so that they might be then on the right side of justice. But these are the spots in your feast of charity when they feast with you, feeding themselves without fear. See, you're either the ones they can be in the feast with you without fear, or the fear of the Lord that is so magnified in your life draws them to conviction and repentance and drags them to the foot of the cross, knowing the fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom. Verse 14, saying, behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints. Are you among that number? That will happen, but that does happen. We get that? It has all of God's promises to his people. That will happen, but that does happen, because we get the many practice versions in this world of what he will complete and fulfill then. So he allows us to take part in the small earthly ways that this physical form can do in a way that will be final righteousness and judgment then. But what is promised is now, in that unique dynamic, as in I have been saved, I am being saved, and I will be saved. In the same way of am being saved and will be is happening now, and it will happen. Are you among the 10,000s of his saints that have no spots in your feasts of charity? Because the body does what it was designed to do. Its relationship with the Lord grows, matures day after day to do something. The Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment upon all, to be righteous. In our healing, we hear this as a bad thing. This sounds like a big, beat you down verse. Let's read this in a different way, just so that we can get out of that old beat you down mentality. To execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are without God among them of all of their deeds that were done without God, which they have committed without God, and of all of their hard speeches which those sinners without God have spoken against him. Yes, oh, you ungodly sinner. We can have that bad beat down thing, but we got to recognize the practical reality of ungodly meaning without God. That everything that's been done, go back to Micah, everything that was done, even the confession and restoration of the thing he had stolen to his mother, all of the things that he did had been done without God. Oh, can you imagine? Repentance without God. Confession and repentance without God. How much in the New Testament is there about confession and repentance as being godliness as part of the salvation experience, part of coming to God, part of the way we know that somebody has been in the presence of God and dealt with them. And yet we even try to do that without him. Yes. I can confess and return the money and yet still have no conviction over the sin of it. It's just human dynamic, just dealing with it. It's just human morality and trying to get along and trying to cooperate and deal with these issues. But God's not in it. This is an ungodly repentance. This is an ungodly thing because it has nothing to do with him. It has all to do with you, and you're okay with that. But he's coming with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment upon all, for his righteousness to be established. And remember, he is righteous. This just doesn't happen without him. He comes, this happens. This is not something that he has to overtly do. His presence does this, judgment. He will declare, he will vocalize it, but this is who he is. To execute judgment upon all, and to convince all those that are ungodly. I wish I could demystify this even more. The presence of God convinces those that are without God that they are without God. Glory. All right? This doesn't even have to be big mystical God thing. If I'm not in the room, all I have to do is come in the room to convince you that you were without me when I was not in the room. Now that's the depth of what's being said in a very practical way. He shows up so that you can see that as good as you thought you were missing everything that you needed. To execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among all of their ungodly deeds. It doesn't matter if they were good, right, doesn't matter if they were technically following the law. They were done without God, therefore they are ungodly deeds. to which they have ungodly committed. It doesn't matter if they were following all the Scripture perfectly. It doesn't matter if how many times they've gone to church. It doesn't matter. No, all of it was done on their own. Therefore, it was ungodly. It was without God. To convince them all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and of all of their hard speeches, which everything they've said in rejection, all the justifications and rationalizations, all the things they've said about why they wouldn't want that, because every time they come in, they try to enter in, they just get shot down. They told how horrible and wrong they're doing, because every time they come into the presence of God, all that happens first is judgment. All that happens first is the setting things right. But I don't want things set right. I want things acknowledged. I want my attempts and my value acknowledged. And we're right back up to the way of Cain and the error of Balaam and the gainsaying of Korah, because it's about God coming to me, not me needing to be with God. And to convince all that are ungodly. Do you need to be convinced today that you're ungodly? In this house, in His presence, do you need to be convinced that you are without God? Can you, if you're in this house today, you can see the difference between somebody who is moved by the presence of God in preaching, in prayer, in thankfulness, in faith, in needing of healing, even those who see sickness right in front and going to the hospital, needing those who see that and deal with it in faith, knowing that no matter what happens to that young man, God loves him more than any of us even do, and that no matter what happens, God's the one that's taking care of him, and God's going to bring him to wherever God wants him to be. Whether it's back here with a testimony, or whether it's him being up on a horse waiting to be one of these 10,000 saints coming right back. He's going to be with God in either place. Do you sit in the midst of seeing people that way? And you sit here and you see people just sort of stand back and do this and have nothing to say, and okay, I'm here to take my lumps again, and no, just can't get it right, but I acknowledge that God is here, so I have to be here because I am trapped by the reality that God is real and God speaks and God's good, but yet I'm not going to actually submit and obey, and I'm not going to live in His life. And we got this whole Balaam thing going on, and it just sort of comes out with Eeyore in the presence of God. Can't even sing humanly. Can you stand in between those two people and want to be like the Eeyores that can't do anything? Do you need to be convinced that your life is lived without God? That's all ungodly means. They're foundational, just you. To convince all that are ungodly among them that everything they've ever done has been on their own. And it doesn't have to be on your own. And doing it on your own only puts you in that trap of sin, consequences, death, need rescue. Sin, consequences, death, need rescue. I am without a king and I have no provision and I have no promise. I am without a king and I have no provision and I have no promise. Over and over and over again, but yet I'm trapped by the knowledge that I need Him to breathe my next breath. And that resentment grows and the sin grows, and we have this cycle. Do you need to be convinced that there's a way out, that there is life, that this judgment that He comes in? See, there's a difference between those who are, in the human practical example, you can go to court, and if you're not guilty and it's a righteous judge, then there isn't anything to worry about. If you're guilty, then there's a whole lot to worry about. If you're innocent, if you are righteous in court, then you appreciate the judge and there's no problem here. But if you're guilty and you're staying there, the justice is a bad thing because it's against you. But you being in that place where justice was against you, he set up this whole situation so that which was against you, he would put on his own son, so that he might, hear this, he might be against his own son in a way that would make him for you. To execute justice, that's judgment, righteously, to execute justice, to convince you that every death that should come upon you came upon him, which they have ungodly committed, and all of their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. We're called to be a church without any spots in our feast. We're called to be a church who there is no separation between the tabernacle and the family, the way the tabernacle is run and the way the household is run, as if the tabernacle is the foundation of it. And that's an Old Testament picture type, but get that the atonement structure of everything that God has established and how he has made you his people should be the foundation of how your day is run, how your household is run. And how was it even said today that there are idols you don't even know that are there? You want to know how those idols can get manifest real quick? Purpose every day for the household to be run in accordance to the Word of God. And everything that rises up in you against that tries to deviate you from that, well, there you go. Another idol. What are you trying to do as opposed to establish the temple of God in your house? I'm speaking metaphorically. The temple was external then. The temple is here now, but you get the idea. But these are the spots in your Feast of Charity. We've come back after 7 months. We've been called to a holy convocation. Simple ways to describe that is a people who are coming purposefully to be in the presence of God, to be obedient to God, so they are not the spot in the feast of the body. Amen.